Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back into the video from Annie News. We got another cut content video for Overlord movie. Exciting. Love these. It's always cool to see what's left out. Or possibly added. I think in this case though, it's a lot of left out. Let's see what's next.
If you were ever wondering how Remedios ended up from here to here, the short answer is thanks to Neia.
Because that did actually bother me in the movie. It's like, they've just all of a sudden travelled really far. Okay, thank you for explaining this.
What the movie didn't show was the pit stop in between, a visit to the pre-destroyed Re-Estize kingdom. That's right.
Oh?
There was a massive scene left out showing Remedios sent her paladins first seeking help from the Blue Roses.
Oh no.
Obviously, this couldn't be included, what with the events of Season 4, but as a result, it makes their trip to the Sorcerer Kingdom a bit disjointed. What I mean is that the only reason the paladins ended up at Ainz's doorstep in the first place is simply because the Blue Roses directed them there. This was an interesting meeting that revealed quite a lot about their perception of Yaldabaoth, and it was preceded by our formal introduction to Neia.
Right.
So, if you want to know more about her, why Remedios hates her, and this left-out scene with the Blue Roses, stick around as this will cover all of that.
Nice.
Part 3. Seeking Salvation, covering Chapter 2 from Volume 12 of the light novel. In the beginning, I had mentioned how Remedios and her delegation spent some time in the Re-Estize kingdom, so to give some context as to how that was possible, it's because Season 4 technically takes place after the events of the movie.
Yeah.
This had covered Volumes 10, 11, and 14, while the movie covered Volumes 12 and 13. So, with Season 4 ending with the Re-Estize kingdom's destruction, that meant any scenes involving it had to be removed, including this unlikely meeting with some well-known characters. It was before even that, though, that we were first introduced to our protagonist Neia, a squire with keen senses and eyes one might consider sketchy. She was currently walking the streets of the capital, guard kept up as something felt incredibly off here. It was as if she was being rejected as an outsider. This was actually just a widespread sense of depression, since if you remember from Season 3, the Re-Estize kingdom had just lost a war. That being the case, it was only natural their people be a bit downtrodden. Their loss was actually way more severe than what the Holy Kingdom was going through right now, since you gotta remember, the Holy Kingdom still had their southern side. Sure, their queen was captured and defenses crippled, but it was only north of the bay that was currently being invaded. The south was completely fine. Still, this feeling of depression left Neia demoralized herself, leading her to reach for the objects she trusted most. It was her yet-to-be enchanted training sword, her trusty partner who'd she'd spent long hours training with. Touching this did calm her down a bit, but still the news she had to deliver left her anxious anyway. So, Neia would make her way back to the inn her and her delegation were staying at, a bougie place Remedios felt they were undeserving to stay at.
Bougie.
What I mean is that, with her countrymen suffering an entire nation away, Remedios and the others felt it was wrong to be enjoying such a luxury. It was actually her second-in-command who convinced them otherwise, though, since as representatives of their holy kingdom, it wouldn't have looked the best for them to be staying at somewhere sloppy. To do so might have sent the message that their country was done for. It's by staying in a place widely considered to be one of the best that the Holy Kingdom gets to maintain the image of their country being fine. Still, the notion didn't sit right with Remedios, but she did understand why it was necessary.
It must be done.
Now, that's not to say their funds weren't running low, since they actually didn't have enough to stay for very long here. That being the case, while normally a squire like Neia wouldn't be given work, the paladins were making use of everyone. They needed to be efficient with the time they did have.
Excuse me.
So, the delegation was tasked with requesting aid from the Re-Estize kingdom, making appointments with whatever strong people they could. The thing about sending a squire to do a job that a paladin should be doing was that it could easily be misinterpreted as disrespect. What I mean is that if every other group is being visited by paladins, one might think their appointment with a squire signified they were less important. Neia had tried to express this as an issue, but such criticism only went to make Remedios angry. Her inability to immediately follow orders only made things worse. Combine this with the fact Remedios was always blaming everything on her, and it was clear that she didn't think very highly of her. Why was Neia even here at all then? Well, that was to keep watch with her sharp vision. Her main task was to be a lookout for them. Still, she was sent out to coordinate meetings anyway, but the odds of her being successful was minimal. I mean, she was after all a low-standing individual trying to meet a person of nobility, all with zero notice, mind you. Despite her being set up for failure from the get-go, though, Remedios was sure to be mad about it anyway. You see, ever since her battle with Yaldabaoth, it's been clear she's been having a hard time controlling her emotions. Before, she was a bit more tolerant and even generous, but now she was completely different. Neia knew this treatment was certainly unfair, but when compared to the hell her fellow soldiers were living back home, a scolding from Remedios was nothing.
Put it in perspective, girl. Put it in perspective.
But it was this thought which gave her the resolve to talk to Remedios, informing her of her failure to get the meeting they wanted. Of course, Remedios was very much unimpressed, so just as expected, some very harsh words were to follow. Fortunately, her second-in-command, Gustav, lightened the blow, but still Remedios made sure to express just how important Neia's job was. She would mention how people were being slaughtered as they spoke, and the longer they took, the more likely they would lose more than just the 4 cities they already lost. The 4 were the political center and capital Jobans, the bayside city to the west of it, Liman, the fortress city nearest the wall, Kalinsha, then finally the city between them, Prado. This didn't even include all the towns and villages spread throughout, so in short, all the major cities of the north were now under the control of Yaldabaoth. And it was in those cities that their people were being held and most likely tortured beyond belief. No one had gotten close enough to see what exactly happened to those held in those camps, but there have been reports of wails and screams echoing from inside of them. So it was that knowledge Remedios felt the need to remind Neia of, reinforcing the importance of why they couldn't fail here. Of course, Neia just wanted to throw those words right back at her, but as a squire there really wasn't anything she could do here. The only choice she had was to respond saying she'd try harder. A response that somehow made Remedios even angrier. She was actually about to scold Neia yet again, but that's when Gustav stepped in to stop her. It was an act of kindness that finally got Remedios to dismiss her, up until Gustav would suggest Neia stay for the meeting they were about to have. Neia couldn't even begin to express her disappointment, since the freedom she thought she had was just ripped away from her. She was so happy to get away from Remedios, only to be brought back immediately. Now, you'd think such a suggestion would make Remedios angry too, but when it came to anyone that wasn't Neia, Remedios was a completely different person. She was genuinely friendly and showed no signs of any hostility. As for the reason why Neia joining might be helpful, it was simply due to the fact her sharp senses might notice something they couldn't. This was, after all, the reason she was with them and not any other knight or squire. With paladins excelling in combat and nothing else, it was always necessary for them to be supported by a scout of sorts. It was an effective combination that meant the group could travel undetected while also protected. So, it was after Neia was sent to prepare for the meeting that Gustav would quickly apologize for what she had to go through. His apparent justification was that the loss of the Holy Lady, her sister, and the paladins was quite heavy. It's a statement that reveals everyone else knew the truth from the beginning. It was just Remedios who refused to accept it. As for why Remedios was lashing out at her, well, as the only person not present at the battle for Kalinsha, she was the only person she could lash out to. To do so to anyone else would be disrespectful of the pain she knew they shared from that battle as well. Of course, Neia was dealing with loss too, and the only reason she wasn't at the battle was simply because she wasn't chosen to be there. So, for all this abuse to come from something she wasn't even in control of, well, that was extremely unfair to her, especially because she was putting in equal to more work than everyone else. What I mean is that it's not like getting this delegation here was easy. Not only did Neia have to memorize all the demi-humans' patrol routes, she also had to keep watch longer than everyone else at night. Needless to say, the only reason everyone even made it here was because of her. That being the case, to Neia, all this abuse was certainly frustrating. It was a feeling of anger she knew she had to keep bottled up for the sake of her people. If Remedios wasn't going to be the one to control her emotions, then Neia knew she could at least do so with hers. To her, it was what the Holy Kingdom needed from her. So, it was after laying out this whole dynamic between Remedios and Neia that now we get to the meeting with the Blue Roses.
Cool.
As adamantite adventurers famous even in the Holy Kingdom, They were a group of women who had reached heights Neia could only dream of. It was in the past that she had only ever heard stories about them, so to see them here in person was kind of surreal. With this being a meeting led by the bearers of two counterpart swords, both were interested in seeing the others after.
Of course.
For now, the meeting would be led with a few pleasantries. Remedios was nowhere near as composed or formal as Lacus was, so after seeing her struggle to properly introduce herself, Gustav took the reins and handled all that for her. It was right as they were about to get to the matter in question that first Tia and Tino would inquire about the identity of Neia. This was quite the surprise, since out of all the stories which made their way to the Holy Kingdom, none had ever gone to mention these twins. They were simply confused as to who Neia was, since with everyone else being introduced as paladins, she didn't really fit the type of such. Her build and muscles were entirely different. They didn't match the warrior-type body that someone like Gagarin had. It was once that was cleared up that Evil Eye would push the conversation to what really mattered. She was tired of seeing Gustav and Remedios act like nobles and instead insisted everyone should just speak frankly. Remedios quickly jumped at the opportunity to, bringing delight to Evil Eye since the only thing that mattered was the contract. The sooner they could negotiate the fee, the easier it would be for everyone. Naturally, Lacus was a bit upset by Evil Eye's manners, but ultimately she too agreed that this was best.
Needs to be done, yeah.
So that quickly led the conversation into what both parties knew. Though adventurers like them weren't supposed to know yet, Evil Eye made clear that they knew Yaldabaoth was rampaging through their country. It was intelligence gathered from seafaring merchants and different branches of the Adventurers Guild. What they knew was still mostly incomplete though, so rather than money, what the Blue Roses wanted was more info. They were willing to trade their knowledge on Yaldabaoth in exchange for what was happening in the Holy Kingdom. This was a deal Gustav convinced Remedios to decline, instead offering the Blue Roses money for their info. It was a payment that would cover what's known as the intelligence fee. Clearly, Gustav didn't want the destruction of the kingdom to become widespread. That being the case, giving money in exchange was definitely better in the long term. The conversation would then proceed with a rundown of what Yaldabaoth did in the Re-Estize kingdom, his 5 mates who held their own against the Blue Roses, and an assigned difficulty rating of 200. For context on where that lines up in terms of human scale.
Jesus Christ. Wow. Everything that is 100 and above is considered to be above humanly possible. Wow. Okay.
This chart from Reddit sums it up nicely. So, 200 was a rating none of the paladins could even fathom, since as far as they were concerned, it was a level of power that never appeared in the human world before. The best they could compare it to was the likes of an Elder Dragon, but even then, that was only at a rating of 100.
Oh.
That being the case, for Remedios and Neia, the only thing they could envision was the guardian god of the sea, an old gentle sea dragon that neither could ever see a human beating. That was a completely useless comparison though, since if what the Blue Roses said was true, Yaldabaoth was twice as strong as that. According to them, he was even more powerful than the evil spirits the 13 heroes defeated. A walking catastrophe that, once present, was sure to bring about destruction. Obviously, such words didn't sit too well with any of the paladins, so that led Remedios to rush into the topic of Momon. As the only person to supposedly drive back Yaldabaoth, what he accomplished was the information they needed most.
I love the whole thing that Ainz has got going on with him. It's just such a cool story. Watching the bad guy, like, just be in the background constantly is so cool.
Anything about what he did to achieve that was sure to be helpful. Instead, Evil Eye simply gushed about how Momon had protected her all while fighting him off, not really providing anything useful. She didn't mention any weak points or items Momon took advantage of, just the fact it was a straight-up brawl he held his own in. So far nothing was proving of very much use to Remedios, other than the fact Yaldabaoth had mates with him. Until now, they only knew of the demons that reported under Yaldabaoth, not maids that were supposedly as strong as adamantite adventurers. Of the demons Remedios did know about, she was curious to learn more about this one. Reason being that, with this being the demon leading the demi-human army, knowing how to beat it was sure to prove useful too. Luckily, this was a demon the Blue Roses fought themselves before, one beaten with the help of Brain.
Oh.
What they don't know is that it's just a basic demon summon, the power of which was less than that of a Death Knight. So, to them, summoning multiple was a power far beyond their imagination, since to do so would suggest this demon was a low-tier summon. This brought up a whole discussion about which of Demiurge's demons were summons and which weren't, only coming to a halt because of Neia. She had decided to enter the conversation with a question of her own. Where did Yaldabaoth come from? You'd think a demon as strong as him would be named throughout history, but out of all the books Evil Eye had searched, none had mentioned his name anywhere. It wasn't possible for it to be an alias either, since for demons and angels, their name was integral to their existence.
Oh, okay.
Like, to go by any other name other than the one they were originally known as, well, that would remove their tether to the world itself.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, certain experiments had revealed to even try would make them vanish. This brought up the idea that Yaldabaoth might be hiding his true form, leading Remedios to tell the Blue Roses about his transformation. Unfortunately, nothing of her description rung any bells, but it was a matter Evil Eye would look into as soon as she could. For now, all the paladins could do was wait. The next topic of conversation was Yaldabaoth's objective, a fully inconclusive discussion since no one had any idea why he attacked. They didn't know why he attacked the Re-Estize kingdom when he did, and they definitely didn't know why he was attacking the Holy Kingdom now. So it was clear both parties had very limited information on Yaldabaoth himself. There was always the option of summoning a demon and gathering intelligence that way, but the odds of a lower tier demon knowing much about a higher tier one was slim. Not only that, but no one really knew anyone even capable of summoning powerful demons. Of the evil casters who were capable of such a feat, they were either in hiding far away from those who actively hunted them, hunted down already, or ruined by their own power. So, with a summoner like that being out of the question, all anyone could do was speculate based on the information they did have. This would be when the Blue Roses would request information themselves, seeking knowledge on Yaldabaoth they were more than willing to pay for too. They wanted to be ready should he ever show up again, especially now that he was running with an army of demi-humans. This was information Gustav was more than willing to share, but not for cash like how the Blue Roses wanted. No, what the Paladins wanted in return was their help. They didn't even need them to fight Yaldabaoth themselves. All they wanted was for them to come to their country and support them. It was help that could even come in the form of healing from the rear. Not a single Rose believed a word Gustav said though, since all of them knew the situation was far more severe than that. With the north conquered, their people in camps and the remaining paladins hiding in caves, the only thing standing between them and total domination was the south. Even then, the south wasn't much of a barrier preventing that, since while the navy was proving effective in pinning Yaldabaoth's forces down, the north knew it was only temporary. The South fully believed they were fine on their own, but that was entirely due to their ineffective sharing of information. You see, with the South being a region that largely opposed Queen Kalka's reign, they weren't exactly up in arms about avenging her. There were actually so many nobles against her overriding her brother that a civil war could have broken out if not for Kalka ignoring it. By choosing to dismiss the nasty rumors the nobles of the South were perpetuating, Kalka had managed to avoid an all-out confrontation with them. Now that Kalka was gone and the North taken though, the South no longer needed to act docile anymore. They were very much capable of eclipsing the North now. So that was the power struggle going on behind the scenes, an inner conflict making the events of the Holy Kingdom a bit more complicated. Still, Gustav would request the Blue Roses' help regardless, even if it was only for a month or two. He would bow his head and beg for them to help save their kingdom. Still, the answer remained no, as Yaldabaoth wasn't the only threat the Re-Estize kingdom was facing anymore. No, with the Sorcerer Kingdom having staked their claim and left their mark, the Re-Estize kingdom was in a far worse situation than it looked. For them, it was far too dangerous to open up another front while their own country was still recovering. Once again, Remedios would reiterate that they wouldn't actually have to fight Yaldabaoth, but now the lies were just getting annoying. Like, for them to think things would go that smoothly was just unreasonable. And it was even more unreasonable to expect the Blue Roses to operate under that assumption too. So, the answer was no for good, leaving the Paladins with one question only. If not for the Blue Roses, then who? Well, Evil Eye came bearing such an answer, and that of course was Momon.
Yeah.
The only difficult part with an ask like that was that Momon was currently working under the employ of the Sorcerer King. So, in order to get him to fight, they first needed to talk to Ainz. A meeting Remedios certainly didn't want to entertain, but knew it was necessary considering what was at stake. That's how the Paladins ended up on the road to him, and it's how Neia ultimately got to meet Ainz. That's an encounter we'll talk about next video, though, so for now I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then be sure to subscribe. Until next time, though.
Ciao. Very cool. Yeah, it's interesting when you know, I knew going in, but it's like, makes sense. The the huge bit cut out, like the film is after. No. The film's in between season 4, isn't it? So yeah, there's bits and bobs. They felt like they couldn't have the castle bits Re-Estize in, which I felt like wouldn't be too confusing. But I suppose there's no like timeline or anything to explain, so you would have to then explain it. So yeah, it probably makes some. It's easier just to cut it out, I guess. But yeah, explains why they got there so quick. And then there's so much more stuff. Intrigued to see like Neia and Ainz's first encounter proper and that. So very cool, very cool. We'll check them out as they get released. And I want to check out the Lord of Mysteries cut content. I just need to actually watch the episodes first, and then we can see what was left out of that as well. So yeah, thanks for watching.